Is the First Descendant the Destiny killer? We're going to be looking at the First Descendant, what it has to offer, and if it stacks up to the competition to become the top dog in the looter-shooter genre. The looter-shooter is one of my favorite genres on the market at the moment. I'm a massive Destiny fan. I love The Division. But it is a genre that has been lacking in competition, and competition is always a good thing. To say that I want this game to make a big impact on the genre, to perform well and really act as a rocket up the butt of the other games in the genre is honestly an understatement. Remember, if you like this video, hit that like and subscribe button and tune in for more content. Starting off with the story. I like a good story. For me personally, it's the catalyst that gets me invested in a game. If it doesn't have a good story, if I'm not invested in the universe and the lore that you've set out, then I tend to fall off reasonably quickly if it comes hand in hand with mediocre gameplay. And I have to say, the story of the First Descendant is so mediocre. The voice acting is mediocre. The storyline is boring. The storylines of characters are ridiculously boring. There's not a character in this entire game that I find likable or anyone I'm rooting for. The bad guys are ridiculous and are just so uninteresting. I've just come off the back of Final Fantasy XIV's Dawn Trail expansion and Destiny 2's Final Shape expansion. Both of them with some absolutely superb writing, superb story building, one of them being a crescendo of a 10-year journey, and the other one being potentially the start of a new journey. And both of them have some fantastic characters. Final Fantasy has bad guys that I'm not invested in at all from the start of this, so I feel like it's a better comparison than the Final Shape. Final Fantasy still does a good job making me invested in those characters. Not in the same way as the Final Shape or Endwalker, but they do make me invested into what their motivations are and where they're going. Are they incredible? Or do they pull it off 100%? No, they don't. But they are a baseline for what a bad guy should be in a video game. The Descendant, I have such little emotional investment into the story and the characters of this game that I just don't care. So right off the bat, it's not a good way of getting me invested into this universe you've created. A universe that has a very interesting art style, I might add. The spaceships are cool. The armor sets are interesting. The guns look really good. Some of the models in this game are phenomenal. Some of the weapons look incredible. When it's a free-to-play game like First Descendant is, you're on a really good stepping stone there when your base models look really great because people want to invest in their characters with cosmetics. So they're doing a really good job there with that start of the investment on a visuals aspect. Environments, there are quite a few different environments, from deserts to forests, the inside of ancient architecture, ruins. I think you go from place to place to place through the campaign and things do tend to look interesting. There are a few areas that are boring, such as deserts. It is hard to make a desert seem interesting. But with that, I would say then, why are you putting the desert in the game in the first place? I think that's something to really think about when you're designing a level. The level design of the game is very formulaic. It's not a bad thing that it's formulaic, but it is very formulaic. You go into a zone, you complete some missions, you do this game's version of a Destiny strike, a small group activity, a small group mission to finish off that zone, and then you go to the next zone in that area. But none of the so-called strikes have any real impact in my feeling towards the game. All of them are very dull. None of them have anything particularly exciting, no particular mechanic. All of them copy mechanics off each other constantly. And again, that's not a bad thing. But in this game, none of them are interesting. It's always shoot orbs off the top of dude's head and then do damage. It's always shoot guys around him to get rid of his shield, then do damage. It's never solve said puzzle, get said buff. This is something Destiny does very, very well in its combat design. And I think the First Descendant moving forward, they're really going to need to have a look at how other games design bosses and other games design challenges and really look into how they can elevate the player's experience inside the game to give that added sense of challenge. Now, Destiny has its own way of doing things. It's very mechanic heavy, raid focused, and I think this game is actually more along the lines of a Diablo style game, where it's lots of enemies on the screen at one time that you can sort of work your way through very, very quickly. And it's that power fantasy. The thing is, in recent times, Destiny's actually done that very, very well, as they have gone from more mechanic focused into the more enemy density focused gameplay, and they have pulled it off very well, where the First Descendant has started from an enemy density way of going, and then I hope they move into the mechanical side of the game, because at the moment it's very boring. There's not much stuff to do, not much stuff to think about when you're in a combat encounter. It is just mow down enemies. A game like Path of Exile and Diablo does that very, very well. And that's mainly because their combat loop is very interesting. You have a number of skills and have a number of abilities that you're firing on very, very quickly to mow down hundreds and hundreds of mobs. And that feeling of grandeur it gives you of how powerful a player really can be is something exquisite. I don't think First Descendant pulls that off. I feel like in the game, holding left click to kill lots of enemies and then slowly adding some abilities in there does not give the same visceral reaction of hell yeah, look how cool I am, like something like Diablo or Path of Exile does. First Descendant needs to look at its ability economy and see how the ability economy plays out. I was playing the Ajax Descendant to start with. It's a very tanky character. You have a shield, you have a bubble, keeps you safe. The shield also can deflect bullets back to the enemy. I really like those abilities. You have a jump, a slam, and then you have a large AoE pulse that does damage. These abilities were quite good, but especially the shield that rebounded enemy fire. I found that really interesting, using it to block off my left side, and while I deal with the right side, and then turn and face the left side as well. The ability to shoot through it while them not being able to shoot you, again, really, really like that. It's something in Destiny that's actually a pain in the ass when a Titan puts down their barricade and you can't shoot through it. But the issue was that where some games like Destiny and Division execute on their military fantasies and power fantasies very well, this game I don't think pulls it off as well. One of the issues is the animations that come with your abilities are very, very anemic. The jump slam for Ajax feels like a little bit of a hop, skip, and a jump. It doesn't feel like an impactful jump and a slam, and it's just not impactful. I was streaming with one of my friends who's a Titan main in Destiny, and I said, how does this ability make you feel? And he said, whatever. He said, it doesn't really look like you're doing anything. And I think that's a really good example of a lot of the stuff in this game. The guns don't sound as good as the Division or Destiny. All the guns sound very, very similar. All the snipers sound similar. All the submachine guns sound similar. All the assault rifles sound similar. They all sound like they've been toned down and they don't have their impactful boom as they should do as a weapon. Even stuff as simple as the reloading animations. People on the internet have this thing about reloading animation. The First Descendant doesn't have that. It all just sounds anemic. I feel like that's the best way of describing a lot of the stuff in this game is anemic. While you're in combat as well, or my character as Ajax couldn't replenish mana. I would have to get kills to get mana to then be able to use my abilities, which led to quite a few scenarios of bullet spongy enemies just taking shot after shot after shot while going through the campaign. If I had a small amount of baseline mana regen, I would think the combat would instantly become a little bit more interesting, where I'd be like peppering enemies and then waiting for my mana to come up and then slapping them with a jump or an AoE, or being able to be in a tight position and be like, if I can survive another 2 seconds, I have enough mana to then put down my shield and sort of try and push the offensive a little bit more. But because you're just stuck there with no mana, you tend to feel really restricted in what you can do with the toolset you've been given as Ajax. I don't have much experience with the other Descendants in the game that you can collect, but that does lead us on to the gameplay loop. So it is a looter shooter. You do collect loot. You collect a myriad of different types of weapons. You collect a myriad of different types of mods, and accessories, as well as components. So for me, the actual gameplay loop feels like a mashup of Warframe and Destiny, where you are farming a lot of stuff to either build your resources up to improve your character or create a new character, or you are farming out specific items to get a perfect role, a bit like Destiny. The one thing this game does have going for it in a massive way is the idea of having that perfect role, chasing that perfect number, being able to build a character that is perfect. And I believe that when you have that perfect build, that perfect character, you will feel unbelievably powerful as a character. Now, it will take a long time to build a character like that, and in some ways, so it should. And when you have finished that grind, I believe that the game could feel very fun. Having a character that is so strong that you can walk into a room at a good level and just do insane amounts of damage with insane amounts of synergy between your accessories, your weapons, and your Descendant. All the bits and pieces coming together, linking together with correct mods on every single aspect of your character to really give yourself something insanely powerful, insanely impactful. I feel like you'll be the type of person to walk into their version of a boss fight or a trial, and for someone to see the amount of damage you're doing and look at you and be like, holy hell, he or she is wiping the floor with this. That is incredible. And if you're that type of player that loves to chase for perfection, I feel like First Descendant is gonna scratch an itch in a really big way. The same way that PoE scratches an itch, the same way that Warframe scratches an itch. If you're willing to grind for a lot of the components though, you will find yourself in this loop of collecting items, collecting components that lead to you being able to complete fights or trials, boss fights, to then have a chance to collect the components you want, to get the Descendants you want, to get the weapons you want, to get the build you want. And as you start really farming these specific items throughout all the different aspects of the game, you will find yourself really stuck in a loop of collect this, get this, right, I've got this, now let's focus on this, right, I've got this, now I need to do this, I've got these 3 bits, now I can do this, now I've got this, now I've got this. And it is that constant loop of everything that drops has a chance to be something incredible. It might be an SMG drop that you've dropped and it has the perfect set of roles. It could be a resource drop for you to be like, oh, holy hell, that's exactly what I wanted. It could be a module drop and you could say, oh yes, that's the last module I need to upgrade my modules. But there is always something this game is dropping to keep you on the hook of, oh, just one more run. This run could be the run. The module system I both love, but also upsets me a little bit because it is directly ripped from Warframe, even to the point where some slots decrease the cost of your modules. It is a nice system. It is a really good, robust system. It's a really good way of customizing weapons. I think there's a reason why it's loved in Warframe so much, and to see it expand out of that game is a really good thing. But with a lot of stuff in this game, it does just feel cut and paste, which is not always a good thing. The mod system feels impactful. When you apply mods to your weapons, the mods do feel stronger. You can feel the impact of the choices you have made in your mod selection straight away, and that's a great feeling. And then you can really spec a lot of time into increasing and enhancing your mods to really make your weapon the best weapon it can be. So you will have your perfect god roll version of your weapon, and then you will have your selection of mods that you think fit perfectly to this weapon, and then you can sink a lot of time into upgrading those mods to then have the best mods that you think are right for this gun. And then you have the best gun with the best mods, and then you link that with your Descendant that you have ground out for and put a lot of time into researching. And then you link that again with the accessories of the game, making sure that your favorite weapon functions correctly with your core, which functions correctly with your descendant, having the accessories you need to enhance specific aspects of your descendant. And all these pieces come together in a very nice way of feeling incredibly powerful and incredibly impactful when you start to get the roles you need to get. When you start to upgrade the things you need to upgrade, you will find yourself jumping in power an incredible amount. There are times in the game where my shield has been destroyed relatively quickly by enemies, but when I linked the shield and I put an SMG on, which enhanced my core, which then enhanced my shield because it matched the elemental types of my shield, and then the shield just is a really tanky ability because I've built into it then, and it felt really good. But then linking that back to the gameplay and having bosses that aren't very interesting have these ads. There are plenty of ads to wipe out, but then the weapons don't feel as good as something like Destiny. So the actual act of playing the game is not as interesting to me because the actual act of clicking left mouse click doesn't feel as good as something like Destiny. Music in the game is next to none. I have heard literally nothing of note. But there is one thing the game has that is probably my biggest bugbear more than anything, and it's the single reason I don't play Warframe. And that is that when you have spent hours collecting all the little trinkets you need to unlock a Descendant or unlock a weapon, you then have to go and research or craft that weapon. That takes real time. It could take hours. There are Descendants in the game that will literally take 1.5 days to unlock after you have collected all your bits and pieces. And it really, really bugs me. When I have spent the last so many hours or so many days, in some cases, so many weeks, grinding out the ability to use this new piece of kit, I want to use the new bit of kit. I don't then want to have to go and find something else to do for the next day and a half before I can use my new toy. So on to monetization. The game is developed by Nexon, who have a extremely dodgy past with monetization. If you want to look more into it, please go YouTube it. It is very well documented how dodgy Nexon can and has been with its monetizing. Everything that can possibly be monetized is monetized in the First Descendant. To start with, the actual buying of items is done via a currency, not for a purchase of the item, and you have to buy currency bundles, very similar to Destiny 2 in this aspect. You will always end up buying slightly more or slightly less than you need. It is a business practice that is scummy and has been done by multiple companies over and over again to make sure that you have a little bit left in your wallet, egging you on to just spend that little bit more. That's the ground, that's the bedrock that is being set here with this currency shop. You can buy characters outright completely to skip grinds. You can buy the most powerful characters in the game, which are the ultimate versions of the Descendants. You don't have to wait for it. You don't have to grind anything. You can just buy it. Those are expensive. The most expensive packs for those ultimate Descendants are £80, which I believe is about $100. So that's expensive. For those of you who grind out and do all the hard work beforehand, and then you have to wait to have that item unlocked in game, you can then pay to skip that time with in-game currency as well. Like a mobile game and Warframe, the game also allows you to pay for inventory slots for most things. As this game is a looter shooter, inventory is obviously very, very handy, and being able to pay for inventory, in my opinion, is a bit scummy. You do get some inventory slots when you master rank up. You don't really get enough to make the impact you need, because you're always going to need to have specific items in your inventory for when you swap out Descendants, because Descendants won't use the same items as other Descendants. So inventory is quite important in First Descendant. a lot more than something like Destiny. There is also a battle pass that includes weapons, skins, colors, currency, boosts, and resources. A lot of those resources are also used to level up your exotic or ultimate guns and your cores and things like this. They're very, very useful. They are a bedrock for your perfect role item is always usable. And you can buy all that in-game or farm it, but you can buy it. And then there's the cosmetic store. Some of it's very sexualized. It's a Korean game. Quite a lot of Korean games are like that. Take it or leave it as you like. Completely up to you on a personal level. As far as I can see, you will not be able to achieve any cosmetic as a free-to-play character. Everything is locked behind a paywall. It is a free-to-play game, and I am perfectly okay with this. Now, there is a bit of confusion around paint that I do want to clarify here. You used to, in previous betas, be able to use resources to roll for paint, like a gacha game. It was awful. Instead of making that system better, they have just removed that system completely. You can no longer acquire paint in-game from what I can see. You have to pay. When you pay for it, you don't have to pay per paint slot. You have to pay per cosmetic. So if you go and buy 2 red paints, you can then use one of those red paints on a gun skin, and then you can use that red paint on every single slot of that gun skin. The fact that you don't just pay for a paint and it unlocks it for everything is really, really scummy to me. I hate that. It reminds me of when Destiny 2 first came out, where shaders or paints were consumables, and there was an uproar about it because it's terrible. It's really bad. If you pay for red paint, you should be able to use red paint when you want to use red paint because you paid for the red paint. I don't mind it being locked behind a paywall because it is a free-to-play game. No gameplay is locked behind a paywall, just a time gate and a grind. Everything else, I don't like the fact that there is incentive to lock slots behind a paywall. I don't like the fact that there is a time-gated system, then there is an incentive to pay money to skip it. I don't like the fact you can pay for Descendants outright, because that incentivizes the new Descendants to be a lot more powerful than the old Descendants, incentivizes people to pay for them straight away. So there are a lot of problems with the monetization, and I would class it as pay to win. The looter shooter genre is missing a lot of competition, and one of the reasons for that, I believe, is because what we already have is very, very good. Destiny does what it does very well. Division, now it's back in proper development, does what it does very well. And it's a very, very hard genre to break into when your competitors do stuff to such a good degree. In conclusion, the First Descendant is not a Destiny killer. At this point in time, I feel like it's the same as WoW. The only thing that can be a Destiny killer is Destiny. The First Descendant is an okay game. It has an interesting loop. There is nothing particularly bad about First Descendant, from its shooting to its boss fights. They're all just fine. And I do think the grind is quite interesting. I think the ability to make a perfect character or a perfect Descendant is really, really cool. And I kind of want to keep playing for that reason alone, to see if I could get that perfect character. But I don't think the game is interesting enough for me to actually partake in that. If the boss fights were a lot more like Monster Hunter, with a series of mechanics, if the boss fights had probably 4 times the number of mechanics that they have now, and those mechanics were more engaging, and the game had the same grind that it does now, I would be more inclined to play. But my end thinking is always, why am I grinding for said thing? And if the answer to that question is not because you're having fun, then I don't really want to continue playing it. I have a lot of friends that keep playing Final Fantasy at a very high level because the fights are a lot of fun. I keep playing Destiny at a high level because the act of playing that game is very, very fun. Where the act of playing First Descendant is probably its weakest point, if you're not including the story, which is definitely its weakest point. So having a fun, interesting grind is all well and good, but your actual priority should be making a very interesting gameplay loop. So every single second of the game, you are interested in continuously pressing that left click. And I don't think that First Descendant holds up in that regard.